Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to my channel. The Wimbledon of Chess, the 2025 Tata Steel Chess Tournament has ended, and we have Pragnananda Rameshbabu from India, the champion of the Masters. But in today's video, this chess player is not him nor Gukesh, but it is none other than Arjun Erigaisi. He is the second highest rated player in the Masters section. Well, in fact, he didn't have a really nice tournament. He doesn't really have a high result. In fact, he has a kind of low rank. But the reason that I wanted to introduce him to you guys, and the reason that he is the main topic of today's video, is because in the last two rounds, he has won all of them against the strongest candidates or the strongest players participating. In round 12, he won against Nodirbek Abdusattorov, and in round 13, he won a very critical game against the reigning world chess champion Gukesh. Now, before these two games, Arjun is actually struggling a lot. In the first 11 rounds, he didn't win any games, and in fact lost many of them. But after that, he is now fully enjoying the game, enjoying the tournament, because he has nothing to worry about, basically. Besides rating, because he has a rating of 28.01 and he lost so many games, this meant that he will drop a lot of ratings, but besides that, he has nothing to worry about. His poor performance in the first few rounds was truly shocking to chess fans because, he just either losing or drawing his games. And as the tournament progressed, we almost even forgot about that he is playing because he is just so struggling a lot. But then in the final two rounds, he suddenly just emerged, coming back to his best performance, defeating two of the tournament's top favorite back-to-back. And once again, he left us in awe. Arjun Erigaisi is back. In the final round, even when facing his compatriot, world champion Gukesh, he didn't hold back, and instead he displayed his true strength and with a calm and enjoyable mindset secured another victory. And this victory, even though it didn't really affect his own rankings, but really affected who should be the champion. Because if he had lost that game, then Gukesh will become the champion immediately. But he won that game and Prague also lost the game. This meant that Gukesh and Prague will need to go for a tiebreak. And then there are a lot of thrilling things that happen in the tiebreaks. Now, although his overall ranking remained low, he finished the tournament with two almost flawless games, achieving an accuracy as high as 98.8. Despite his final standing, he bowed out with honor. Now, the last two rounds were definitely worth analyzing in detail, and today's video, I will cover these two games, Arjun Erigaisi's final two games, and I hope you guys will enjoy it. And also, as for the tournament champion Pragnananda Rameshbabu, I haven't covered his games in this video because I will be participating in a very important tournament over the next few days, and I won't be having time to record two videos. So I decided to record Arjun's video first, and then after I come back, I will record Pragnananda's video as well. But anyways, going back into Arjun's two games, first, let's take a look at round 12, where he is playing against Nodirbek Abdusattorov, who actually, before losing round 12, was also one of the favorites to fight for first place. Before losing this game, there were Gukesh, Prague, and him who were fighting for first place, but after losing this very critical game for him, he is just out of the favorite for the champion. So now, Arjun is with the white pieces. He had a really bad start with the tournament, and this is the tournament is already about to end, and he is only 3.5 out of 11. But let's see how he played this game out. You start with d4 and Nodirbek plays knight f6. We have e6, knight c3, and bishop b4, the Nimzo Indian defense, whom all of us know. Queen c2, the main line. We have d6 here, and then e3. Short castle here was played, and then we have bishop d3, c5, and then knight f3 on the board, knight c6. Well, basically both sides are just developing their own pieces. Black is putting some pressure on the d4 pawn, but here Arjun doesn't really need to worry about that right now, and he plays short castle. In the game, we have bishop takes c3. Well, bishop takes c3 might not have been the best choice here because white hasn't really played a3 yet to kick this bishop away. So the bishop can actually just stay on b4, or maybe at some point even go back to c7. But here taking on c3 is not the best. Queen e7 and bishop a5 are the top two candidate moves. Here we have bishop takes c3 on the board, however, and then queen takes c3. Of course, you take with the queen instead of taking with the pawn, because taking with the pawn will just simply damage your own pawn structure. So queen takes c3 was played in the game, and here Nodirbek decides to play queen e7, which is not considered as a really accurate move here. Here for black can actually just go e5 immediately to start launching a pawn attack in the center. Now, white can actually decide to close up the center with d5, and black goes e4 to fork the bishop and the knight, but here white can just simply move away one of the pieces, well, the knight in this case, go back to knight d2 for example, and now if you take on d3, white can take the c6 knight, and that is a free trade. Here we have, however, queen e7 on the board, and Arjun here decided to play d takes c5, with actually thinking for about 8 minutes before playing the best move in the position d takes c5. Well, the reason that d takes c5 is the best move here because you see that white has the bishop pair, and of course, if you're the side who has the bishop pair, you definitely want the position to become more opened. And that is why here d takes c5 is played, and you just want the position to become more opened, maybe in the future pushing e4, e5 to activate both of your bishops. In the game, we have d takes c5, which is kind of forced, and then knight e5 jumping in, knight takes c5, queen takes d5. Now we have two bishop versus knight and bishop, and usually in these kind of situations, knight and bishop are not bad. Usually, well, actually according to the position, but in this point, white is better because these two bishops are kind of much more active than the knight and the bishop, especially the c8 bishop because it is blockaded by its own pawns. Here we have rook d8 on the board, developing the rook and attacking the d3 bishop, bishop c2 back, knight g4. Well, knight g4 here is another inaccuracy because here white can just simply play queen g3 as played in the game, and this knight is somehow misplaced, and on the next move, white can decide to go h3 or f3 to kick this knight away. So the knight necessarily don't need to jump there to kick the queen away, and here what black should do is actually first of all to develop his pieces, the rook and the bishop. And here b6 is considered as a really nice move here because you want to fianchetto your bishop b7 here, to this big open diagonal, and probably, I don't know, white can go b3 as well. If you go bishop b7, I can go bishop b2. These two bishops are really strong, but black also have this really nice bishop, light square bishop, and maybe in the future, if black wants to get rid of white's bishop pair, black might have some chances to go bishop e4 to trade off a pair of bishops. But in the game, instead of playing b6, Nodirbek decided to go for the attack immediately and plays knight g4. Arjun here simply drops back with queen g3, attacking the knight, and we have e5 here. So we see that Nodirbek's idea is not to develop this bishop to the big diagonal, but instead, he just wants to open up the diagonal immediately with e5, and maybe in the future bishop f5 or bishop e6. So in the game, we have f3, kicking this knight away. The knight just drops back, and you see that knight g4 is now not like a useful move at all. It just simply lures white to go f3, but f3 is not even a bad move for white. White can now control all of these light squares, and the queen can even drop back to f2 at some point to go to the other side. Here for white, Arjun plays b3, so now he goes for the development, and black goes knight h5. Actually, in this game, Nodirbek just played a lot of knight moves, but sort of speaking, these knight moves are not the best moves. Well, knight h5 is not bad, but knight g4 is a really big, like, I don't know, like the start of disaster, I can say, because it wastes a tempo somehow. Here, queen f2 goes back, and we have bishop d7 on the board, bishop b2 developing the bishop, bishop c6, and we have rook a d1 here, offering a trade of rooks. In the game, h6 was played, opening up a window for the king to run away. And here we have h3, so white is basically doing the same here. And we have knight f6 on the board. So we see that Nodirbek is jumping this knight a lot of times. First knight f6, then knight g4, then knight f6 back, and then knight h5, and then knight f6. So Nodirbek spent a lot of moves on this knight, but some of the moves are not necessary and kind of wasting tempos. Here, Arjun decides to get his queen back with queen g3 and attacking the e5 pawn. Black plays rook d1, trading off a pair of rooks. Rook takes, of course, and rook e8 defending the e5 pawn. But already we can see that who is the attacking side and who is the defending side. And it's obvious that white is the side who is attacking because black has this huge weakness on e5. And for white doesn't really have any clear weaknesses. The e3 pawn, well, it's not really considered as a weakness because it is just impossible for black to attack the pawn. And white has this really strong bishop pair. So white is doing much better here. In the game, a4 was played, creating a bigger space on the queen side. We have knight h5 here. The knight again jumps to h5 to tickle the queen. The queen drops back, and then, wow, that is a mistake here. The first mistake made in the game. Here for black, after a lot of calculation, you need to go e4 here. This is a move that needs a lot of calculation because it blockades your own, it blockades your own bishop, but at the same time also blockades white's bishop. And also, just for you guys to know, in a game, a pawn move is always worth thinking. Well, besides the first move, e4, d4, especially in middle games, a pawn move normally needs a lot of calculation, especially these pawn breaks or pawn moves that happens in the center of the board, because that can cause a lot of difference. e4 is the best move here. Now for white, if white takes, then this is not good because there's bishop e4 and black successfully manages to get off a pair of bishops. And here, the best option is to go f4 here to close out the center, but this means that this light square bishop is now kind of passive. And this pawn is well defended by black's pieces, so it's not considered as a weakness anymore. And probably in the future, the knight can jump back and try to reroute to a better place. But in the game, however, Nodirbek decides to play queen g5, and this is considered as a mistake here. And why is this a mistake? Well, there's this now excellent move g4. And I think this is the move that Nodirbek misses. g4 was played, and in the game we have f5 on the board. Well, Nodirbek actually played this move after only 6 minute think. Definitely g4 is something that shocked him. Still, interestingly, the best move is to go e4 here. And after f4, the queen goes back, still keeping this pin. This means that the pawn cannot take back. And f5, if you want to keep attacking the queen just goes back. And if you don't go f5, probably something like queen h4 to attack the knight just goes back. But the queen and the knight are still really misplaced, and white has a huge space advantage on the king side. White is much better here, actually. But in the game here, Nodirbek decides to play f5, starting to sacrifice some pawns, and the position is starting to get really messy. We have h4 here attacking the queen drops back, and we have bishop takes f5, and suddenly the position is just simply leaning towards Arjun's side. Everything is just better for white. White is in a winning position. Here we have queen f7 here, and of course you don't take because you lose the bishop, and the position is suddenly better for black. But here, Arjun found the best move, and he played rook d6. threatening bishop g6 suddenly, which is an even deadlier threat. We have knight f6, dropping this knight back and preventing bishop g6. But here we have g5 attacking the knight, h-g5, h-g5, knight h5, bishop g4. The reason that you don't go bishop g6 here is because there's probably queen e7, and the position is still quite unclear after bishop e8. I mean, white is still up material and close to winning, but then after queen g5, black might have some counterplay. So in the game here, Arjun decides to go for the calmer winning strategy, and he plays bishop g4, attacking the knight, threatening to go g6. We have queen e7 on the board, attacking the rook takes c6. This is a miss here. The best move is to go rook g6 instead, simply trapping this knight, also defending the g5 pawn. And this is just simply winning here because white is going to be up a full piece on the very next move. Rook d8 here. Well, here you don't take on h5 because there's rook d1, and after king g2 there's queen d8, where suddenly black gets a lot of counterplay. But here you just simply play this f4 move here. And then if you go rook d1, well, you cannot go rook d1 because the bishop is controlling that square. So after f4, then white will take this knight on the very next move, and that will be game over. But in the game, Arjun decides to take the bishop, and after bishop takes h5, he traded a rook for two minor pieces, which is still not bad for white. But then there's queen takes g5, bishop g4, and e4. And suddenly, black is having a lot of counterplay, and it's not easy for white to play, actually. We have king f1 on the board, running away from this pin, and then queen g6, queen c2, pinning this pawn again, and black is still under a lot of pressure, but with accurate play, black will be able to save the position. But here, Nodirbek just made a mistake. Well, he still has 41 minutes left on the clock, but at this point he has just so much pressure. The best move is to go queen h7 to protect the queen. The king is protecting the queen, and on the next move, black will be able to take the f3 pawn. But this move, probably Nodirbek is just thinking that he is doing fine here, and he played rook f8. Too greedy because he wants to go for queen g4 to win the bishop, but then simply there's queen g2 here. Arjun found the best move here, defending the g4 bishop, and after e takes f3, bishop e6. This is a brilliant move. Well, the reason that it is brilliant is because if black takes, there's queen g7 mate in 1, and if you don't take, then you have to move the king to defend the g6 queen. King h7 was played, but then queen h3, queen h6 block. Okay, this is somehow back to normal, but then we have king f2 on the board. Actually, here taken on h6 wins immediately also, but king f2 is also fine. We have rook b8, trying to take a few pawns here. We have bishop f5 check, g6, and here another brilliant move. Can you guys see this move? And it is bishop g6. And king has to take, but then there's queen e6. Not to go queen g3 if you're thinking that you can win this rook, but then after queen g5 here, suddenly if you take, there is mate in 2 for black. And this is a huge turnover. But here, you have to go queen e6, check, and then after king h5, bishop f6, threatening mate with queen f5. We have queen h7 on the board, but then after queen e5 check, another really accurate move, and after king g6, now you take the rook, because if you take the f6 bishop here, there's now queen d6, white will gobble up the pawns and force a queen trade, and that will be game over as well. What a nice game played by Arjun. In the last few moves, he had no mistakes. King f1, one exclamation mark, and queen c2, another exclamation mark, another 2 exclamation marks, and then another brilliant move, 1 exclamation mark, and at the very end, a beautiful touch, queen b8. So he won round 12, and this meant that Nodirbek is now just impossible, like not impossible, but will have a really low possibility to become the champion. And basically it is just a race between Pragg and Gukesh. And we have round 13, the very last round, where Gukesh is with the white pieces, we have Arjun with the black pieces. Gukesh starts with e4, and we have the Petrov's defense, which is a line that can be really easy to become a draw. Here we have knight c6 and bishop g2, queen d7, and this is actually a very normal game, although we can see that Gukesh is in a very desperate situation to win, because we can see by his action to start pushing the pawns here. On the queen side, he is trying to go really aggressive here, but Arjun plays bishop h3, first of all offering a bishop trade. Bishop takes, queen f3, and we have h5. And Arjun says, okay, you're not the only one who is having fun here. I am going to start my attack on the king side, and let's see who is faster. And we see that Black's direct threat is to go h4 on the very next move. We have knight d4 played, d5 played, taking a pawn, but then there's h4. Now already at this point, Black has a small initiative because even though Gukesh is up a pawn, but we see that Arjun has a really nice attack on the king side, and this means that Gukesh needs to play really accurately. Gukesh plays knight f6 first, so trading off the knights, and Black has this really ugly pawn structure, but it also could be a good thing because the g-file is now open, and at some point the bishop comes out, the rook comes to g-file, and it could be really deadly. And here, Black is actually threatening a lot of things. First of all, to take on g3, and basically here, the only move for white to stay not that bad is to go queen g2. This is somehow like an only move here, offering a queen trade. But even after this, queen f5 maybe, Black is still doing better here because Black has a lot of counterplay on the king side. But shockingly, Gukesh, he is kind of desperate not to trade off the queens because after takes, this will become a draw very easily. And he doesn't really want to draw. In the game, he decided to go for a really risky option with rook d1. This is a mistake. And I think, of course, in the actual game, Gukesh definitely knows that queen g2 is the best move here, but he just doesn't want to get the queens off the board, because if the queens were off the board, then the drawing possibilities will become even greater. And if the queens were on the board, the position can be really messy, and possibilities like things can happen, like risky things, or things can turn around really fast. But after rook d1, there's h takes g3. And really important here is that you cannot take with the queen here, because thinking that if Black takes with the queen, this will be a really nice thing for white because white is now up a very healthy pawn. But here, after queen takes, Black can just simply go queen h5, ignoring your offer of queen trade, and then on the very next move threaten to go rook d6, not rook d6, bishop d6, and then rook g8 out to pin the queen and the king, and your queen is just simply walking into file. And that is why here you have to take with the h pawn, and also don't take with the f pawn because there's queen h2. You take with the h pawn, and knight c4 was played in the game here. Now, here basically for Black, we can evaluate this position and we can see that the two worst pieces for Black are this knight on the very sided file, and we have this bishop undeveloped. The bishop is like making these two rooks unable to link with each other. But here in the game, Arjun decides to first of all activate his knight with knight c4, which is the best move here, and Gukesh made another mistake. He played bishop f4. The best move here is again to go queen g2, but again, probably Gukesh doesn't want to get the queens off the board, but sometimes if you're just way too if you're just so willing to win a game, that makes you go for a really risky option, sometimes it can lead to disaster because risky things can lead to risky outcomes. And there's bishop f4. Here Arjun spots the very best move, bishop h6. It is not bishop d6 here because after bishop d6, bishop takes d6, rook takes d6, the rook will have a harder time to go to the king side immediately. I mean, if you take with a knight, you will face knight d5 here, which could cause a lot of trouble for black. But here, bishop h6 is the best move here. Bishop takes h6, rook takes h6, queen g2. Finally, Gukesh decides that he needs to go for this move. But then why not go for it immediately? Well, the reason for that is that the reason for the queen g2 is that now if you don't go queen g2, let's say you just go for a waiting move, then black is now threatening a lot of things, let's say here, and then rook e8 cutting off this king. Trouble, there's a lot of trouble that could be coming here. So that is why in the game Gukesh decides to go for queen g2, and also trading here into an endgame is not bad for white, because just to remind you guys that Gukesh is up a pawn right now, a very healthy pawn, and black also have this really ugly pawn structure. So trading into an endgame is not necessarily that bad for Gukesh, but here Arjun just says, no, I'm going to keep the queens on the board, and he plays queen h5. Here we have a lot of normal moves going on. Knight a3, not the best move because the knight is just way too passive on a3. Knight d6 is a better option here. This knight can join the attack with knight f5 on the next move here. But knight a3 was played. Arjun's idea is just trying to tickle the pawns, but the knight is just way too passive here. In the game, b6 was played. You see, knight a3 somehow gives white some counter attack on the queen side. Here, Arjun takes with the c pawn, and it is the best way to take here, because if you take with the a pawn, there's rook a4, and suddenly white is attacking this knight, but also threatening to go rook a8, and that can lead to a lot of trouble for black. That is why you take with the c pawn here. We have rook a4 anyways, knight b5 back. Don't forget that this knight is being protected. At first that you might say, wait, the knight is just simply unprotected, but then you just realize that on the very other side of the board, the queen is eyeing this knight, so it's defending this knight. And here in the game we have rook d3 on the board, but this is just a simply losing move. Here the best move is actually to go g4, but this is a move that is so hard to see. Queen g5 maybe, but then there's knight e2 here. This knight will be able to get to the king side and defend just right on time here. And if you take on b5 here, there's queen d1, so you have to look for diagonals. This queen is really flexible here on h5. It defends the b5 knight, also attacks the d1 rook, and also at the same time threatens like mating ideas on the h file. Here we have rook d3 played in the game, but then there's just knight c3. Rook c3, it is with check, but then after king d8, also a very accurate move here, because if you go king b8, there's now g4, and g4 basically, if the queen moves away, there's queen g3 check coming up. So that is why you go king d8, another really accurate move by Arjun. Now if you go g4, there's queen b5 and no checks on g3. So in the game, we have f3 on the board, creating a path for the king to run away, but then we have queen b5 here attacking the rook, also threatening some rook h1, queen b1 ideas, and this is just way too much for white. Gukesh here played rook a7, desperately trying to find counterplay, but then we have rook h1. Even here, queen b1 wins as well, but there's like king f2. Remember that you cannot go rook h2 here because there's rook a8 check, and after king d7, rook takes h8, and if you take the queen here, two rooks versus a queen, white is suddenly back into the game. But here we have rook h1, really accurate, and then after king f2, we have rook h2, and here Gukesh resigned the game because he is just down material. Rook a8 doesn't do anything because the rook is now out of the last rank, and black is going to be winning the queen on the very next move. And with that, Arjun won the last round. This meant that Gukesh lost this game, and he is not yet the champion. But fortunately for Gukesh, Prag also lost his own game, which means that these two players will be having a tiebreak. And I think in the very next video, I'll be covering the tiebreaks. But in today's video, the main topic, the main star is Arjun Erigaisi. In these last two games, he just played perfect chess, and he won this game against Gukesh with 98.8 accuracy. What a game by Arjun. And yeah, so I hope you guys enjoyed these two games as well as this video. And please subscribe. I'll see you in the next video. Bye!